Welcome on inside yet another edition of the Business of Social podcast powered by STN Digital. I'm your host, David Brickley. Each and every episode, we talk to the experts and get their advice, strategy, and all those things on the ever-changing social digital marketing landscape. This show is no different. Episode number 65, as always, joined by producer Will Kelly. And before we get into our guest, Will, you know what? Let's tease our guest. A nice little tease here. Christine Wicks, she's the senior partnerships manager, over at Twitter Sports. Also 2020 SBJ New Voices Under 30. Killing it under the 30 years of age. I love it. But Will, as we always do each and every show, we like to take the number of the episode and play a little game with it. So we got 65, retirement age.
Yeah,
for some of the most famous people.
I have to be on some kind of list or something because I'm on the famouspeople.com more than anybody, I think.
Yeah.
Looking at random celebrities' ages. But 65, some heavy hitters, so let's get to it.
Okay.
Bill Gates, Mel Gibson, Bryan Cranston, the immortal Kris Jenner, Whoopi Goldberg, Lindsey Graham, Arsenio Hall, Willem Dafoe, Billy Bob Thornton, and we'll leave it at that.
I'm going to go with Walter White. Same haircut, you know?
Yeah.
Bryan Cranston. I mean, one of the best actors I've ever seen, anyway. At least that show, one of the best shows I've ever seen. So, Bryan Cranston it is.
Widely regarded as one of the best, if not the best, TV shows of all time.
All right, so episode number 65, the Bryan Cranston podcast. We are talking to Christine Wicks. She's the senior partnerships manager at Twitter Sports. This will be a good one. Will, I really want to ask her all the things, spaces, fleets, these new features that came out, but also she oversees like 4 different tiers, like revenue, organic, support, innovation across athletes, across sports partners on the TV and sports club side. So it's going to be an interesting conversation. Excited to talk to Christine right here on the Business Social. All right, she is a senior partnerships manager at Twitter Sports. Also 2020 SBJ New Voices Under 30. Congrats on that one. So we bring in Christine Wicks to the Business of Social. Christine, so excited to dig in with you today.
No, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. So why don't you give the viewers a little bit of a taste of your day-to-day? Because I know we've had TJ on the program, big friends, obviously, with David Herman and really the whole staff. You guys are phenomenal at what you do. But tell us exactly what you oversee day-to-day.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like I do something different every day. That's what keeps it fun and interesting. But if I had to bucket my job into kind of 4 different sections, I think they would be kind of as follows. One being revenue and business development with teams, networks, leagues, that sort of thing to help them monetize the audiences that they have on Twitter with the content that they create and own from a licensing perspective. Second is really the organic side of it. So how do you use Twitter's products and tools to the best of your ability to connect with your fan bases and communities on the platform? The next would be support. Obviously, Twitter is a social media platform, and sometimes things go one way or the other. So we're kind of that first line of defense for our partners if anything goes awry. And then fourth, and probably my favorite, is the innovation factor. I think at Twitter, we really get to think outside the box a lot, and being able to collaborate and be creative with our partners at their tentpole events really allows us to just do some cool, I don't know if I can say this word on here, but do some cool shit on Twitter, the only type of stuff you can do on Twitter. That makes it fun. You look at tweets on confetti, the Showtime cam, things like that you just really wouldn't think you could do anywhere else. So I would say those are kind of the 4 buckets I would kind of devise my job into. Yeah,
and then can you speak a little bit about Twitter, just from a marketing perspective? I think it's such an important tool. Obviously, real-time marketing is where you guys, there's just no competition. I mean, when you talk about Instagram and Facebook and TikTok, all great platforms, all good in different ways, but nobody really can hold account to what Twitter is able to provide during the Super Bowl, during the NBA Finals. Like it provides that water cooler talk where you can speak with people around the globe. But can you talk about, just for brands, like how to use that, or how you kind of explain that to sports teams, leagues, how to just leverage that tool, because it is so unique.
Yeah, I mean, that's the secret sauce, right? That's Twitter's superpowers. Seeing news break first, fast, quickly on Twitter before it happens anywhere else. I mean, just within sports, you look at Woj doing Woj bomb during the trade deadline, free agency, and some players follow Woj because they find out from him first that they're getting traded versus their actual team or their agent or whatnot. So being able to use that real-time power is so impactful. And when you look at different brands and teams and leagues, especially on the brand side, being able to tap into an audience that is conversating and consuming content during a live moment, there's no better place for it. You kind of reach them first and fast. And I think to that point, Twitter makes it impactful in a what's happening now kind of realm. And especially with sports too, right? You see it happen on TV and then you're catching up on Twitter, really having that symbiotic relationship between the game and that second screen. And I think being able to have the power of that community and conversation in real time makes for some of the best stuff that happens on the timeline. I always say when something crazy happens on TV, whether it's a sports game, news, whatever it is, really in the sports realm, though, you see it the best. A crazy play happens, maybe that Kawhi Leonard 3 in the playoffs 2 years ago that hit the rim about 7 times before it went in, and you immediately go to Twitter and no tweet has to say Kawhi Raptors 3-pointer. It is just pure chaos and you automatically know what the moment's about. I find that to be the best of Twitter sports and the best of sports on the platform, and you can't get any better than that.
I think like Woj literally ruined the NBA draft on linear because he was breaking it like minutes before it go live. So they asked him to stop doing that. So he started saying, the Charlotte Hornets are motivated to draft LaMelo Ball, like he...
Exactly. It's funny to see what happens when Twitter kind of finds its way in there. And you even see it with the NFL draft this past weekend. They asked commentators and journalists and analysis, things like that, to refrain from tweeting certain things because of it eliminates the surprise on TV. But again, it just speaks to the power that Twitter has and the determination impact of being able to tweet quick and fast and having that impact on the information that's released.
Yeah, I want to talk about a new feature you guys have that I'm excited about, but obviously really start with Clubhouse, kind of bringing back this whole new audio way of communicating. Twitter, comes back or counters that with Spaces, and I know you've been working with a lot of your partners on it. How have you seen it be successful thus far, and where do you think the power of that is for brands to be able to leverage?
Yeah, it's funny, right? I feel like we're going back in time a little, like you said. It seems like radio to me, and that seems so many years ago. But the fact that you're able to kind of come full circle here and just continue to empower the conversations that we see happen on Twitter in a more kind of endemic and fruitful way by actually just utilizing your voice and have a room and a space to talk about it. I think it continues to speak to Twitter's value prop of connecting all of these different voices and seeing different POVs with people that you'd probably never have the chance to actually talk to in person or meet in person, just given the way that Twitter operates. So with Spaces, we're super excited about it. I think being able to, again, just continue that conversation and hear from different folks is going to really help us kind of continue the impact of that conversation. I mean, you look at the NFL draft this past weekend, being able to have the Jaguars have Travis Etienne and Trevor Lawrence join a space quickly to say hello to fans and just kind of about their experience. You can't get that anywhere else. I mean, a press conference is a press conference, but to be able to have kind of the more lax banter and discourse you see in Spaces, because it is a little bit more of a relaxed environment, I think you kind of see athletes relax a little bit, see coaches relax a little bit, which is fun. And you don't always see that. I think so too for the athletes. Obviously they're going through press conferences, phone calls after one another when they get drafted, things like that. So this kind of gives them something different to participate in as well. So we'll definitely continue to see the product evolve. I know it's definitely a priority for us at Twitter. And just today they released a bunch of other kind of new features that are coming soon. So it's definitely top of mind for us. And we feel as though it really helps the user stay in one place. I think you see a Clubhouse go live and people are talking about it on Twitter. Now kind of having the features one in one, everyone will be able to kind of stay within the app and continue to utilize it in the best way possible.
We've kind of made a joke here on the podcast and around the office here at STN, like everybody has stories now, whether YouTube stories, and I think Slack has stories now. Obviously, you guys launched Fleets recently too. Again, where have you seen the impact there for in the sports space, I guess, on where that's been engaging, or what type of content should live on there, maybe versus the feed, or maybe it's a combination of both?
Yeah, I mean, you see kind of the copycats coming through. And again, I think that's the best form of flattery a little bit too. But I think at the end of the day, being able to utilize the content that you made for one platform, but able to bring over in the same type of formatting, things of that, just adds eyeballs to it, right? So I think we're not always going to catch the same people on each platform, but at least the content is living in a certain space that people can see it as. I think we've seen similar kind of strategy that you would see on an Instagram to fleets. I think being able to fleet a tweet has been fun if it's something that you don't actually want to tweet itself, since that is a little bit more permanent. Being able to fleet it kind of gives you that short-term vibe, which some people kind of dive with if they don't think their tweets are going to have any impact. But again, it just gives us another kind of canvas to play with, for brands to play with, and kind of think differently when you kind of come to Twitter versus just thinking in tweets and media. You kind of get to deal with this bigger canvas now, and kind of have a little bit of a different strategy, which we've definitely seen brands lean into.
You know, it's funny. I saw a kind of a not argument, maybe debate happening. I think it was on Twitter, a little bit on Instagram, the last couple of weeks about engagement humping, they were calling it. But, you know, Twitter specifically, but social media has really turned more into memes. I think Elon Musk on Clubhouse said, if a picture's worth 1,000 words, a meme's worth 10,000 words. So it really is a way that we're communicating, similar to how emojis were not really a thing in the past, and that becomes such a huge part of our dialogue when you text someone or what have you. But in sports specifically, I feel like the memes are becoming such a huge part of strategy. I was talking to Katie Daly over at ESPN on the podcast a couple of episodes ago, and you almost need to have, I was saying, like a comedy writer, someone that has really, amazing at copy, because it really is about showing James Harden walking into an arena, and then you have a blank canvas to say what this means, or walking into the weekend like, or whatever those different memes are. But I'm sure you've been so close to it. I'm sure you've seen that transition or the new era of how to follow sports.
Yeah, it's been kind of the casual fan side of it, right? I think memes are born, and then you have all these different verticals being able to tap into it, and you kind of get to attract yourself to a different fan, because it's something that we haven't done before. It's so different from the box scores and the stats and things like that. True. That are for those diehards, but then you get to kind of pull in the culture side of it with these memes that can span any vertical, and you're kind of reaching that new casual fan. I think being able to kind of have that kind of segue of reaching another fan, I think is always fun, and it helps keep it light. It keeps it fun. I think on Twitter, again, it kind of goes with the breaking news kind of comedy angle of it, where you're tapping into what's happening now in that real time. And I think what I always find funny is that you see it on Twitter, but then you'll see a screenshot of it on Instagram, and someone posts that as Instagram. So again, your term of engagement humping is kind of using the same content in other places. And again, people are coming back to Twitter to talk about it. But again, I think you're able to kind of tap into a different audience, which I know brands are looking for, partners are looking for nowadays more than ever. And I think the other piece too, and one that I always find do a really good job with it, is that all the clubs from different leagues have found such a good way to find their voice. And I think they always do a really good job at kind of utilizing the memes in a different way that kind of tie back to their fan base and what they're known for. So they always do a good job with it. But memes definitely are born on Twitter, and definitely have some good runs on Twitter for sure.
My hot take on this whole engagement humping debate is, listen, you got to give the people what they want at the end of the day. And I think this happened in linear not too long ago, when people were up in arms about reality TV and it's cheap TV, and like it's taking over, the day slots and night slots. It's like, well, people are watching Survivor, people are watching Big Brother, people are watching Keeping Up with the Kardashians. So you can either, I guess, lean into it, or say, be a traditionalist and say this is ridiculous. But that's how the community is talking now.
For sure. And to that point too, you want to make sure you're leaning into it in the right way. I think sometimes you find people who are forcing a little bit too. You want to make sure you're doing it in an authentic way, an organic way to you, and kind of what your brand and league and team stands for. So to your point, got to give people what they want, but do it in the authentic and organic way. That's a great point. Where we'll make the impact, for sure. Yeah.
There's nothing worse than those brands that just follow the trends and just try to hop on every single trend. Like, sometimes your brand shouldn't be involved with that trend. Let's just stay back. I want to talk about, it was the talk of sports, so I wanted to make sure we spoke about it and get your thoughts on the Raiders tweet after the George Floyd trial announcement, and just kind of people obviously up in arms about that. I think you and I have a similar thought process on what that meant and kind of how brands can avoid that moment, but I'd love to kind of open it up to you.
Yeah, I mean, Twitter has been a place for conversation around social justice for forever now. And I think we really saw the height of it this past summer. And to kind of go with a sports angle, athletes were using their platform for good, and making sure that people were understanding what was happening, making sure that they were making an impact, and using the power of their platform for good. And you really saw the height of that this summer, especially with the WNBA. So this is nothing new. I do think there was a lot of buzz happening on that day. And to the point that I just made, afraid brands entering conversations to be forceful with it, I think sometimes isn't always the best way to go about it.
Yeah.
And the Raiders made a decision, and that was that. But I think at the end of the day, reading the room is always key. But to that point, Twitter is a place where that conversation occurs. But again, just making sure you're doing it in the right way and understanding kind of what this means when you do post it, I think is kind of the essence of that story. So Mark Davis came out, talked about it. It is what it is at this point, but it is something that was definitely a lot of conversation and buzz was happening around that tweet when it was posted.
Yeah, and I think you know more than anybody, but I still feel, again, this is something I was talking about the podcast earlier, was there's still so many people that this intern tweeted this, and not in that instance, but I'm just talking about the industry as a whole. There's still like a bunch of interns are tweeting, which is just not the case. These are professionals that have been in the space for 10, 12, 15 years. But I still think people don't understand that one tweet is literally the equivalent of a breaking news on CNN or a press release of maybe 20, 25 years ago. One single tweet can literally affect stock prices, can literally affect somebody's image, cancel culture, whatever you want to call. But I still think, I would love to get your thoughts, but I still think as far as a society, some people look at Twitter, look at social, it's just social, just Twitter, a bunch of kids on that, but not understanding that this is literally maybe the only way you can reach a consumer at mass is by one single tweet. And I don't think there's enough care or precision around that sometimes by some large brands.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, the virality of a tweet can either be extremely positive or go in the completely other direction, depending on what the context of the tweet is. I mean, you look at Elon Musk tweets and their stock can go up or it can go down. So to your point, a lot of people see the impact of that. I understand your point around it's just social, things like that. But at the end of the day, these things need to go through a series of approvals just to ensure they're ending up in the right place, saying the right thing at the right time. So again, virality is Twitter's superpower, but it needs to be utilized. With a lot of power comes responsibility. So just making sure we utilize it.
And that's why I think some brands make the error of like, just throw it up on Twitter or throw it up on Instagram, it'll be fine. Like, no, like it needs the same approval process as any other major announcement would be.
Absolutely.
For sure, because it is that powerful. In other news, we just got through the NFL draft. And, I was talking to Dave Feldman over at formerly at the NFL, now in the NFT space.
Yes.
But we were kind of talking, and I was talking to David Herman on your team too about the Showtime cam, which was an incredible pivot for you guys during last season. And, but yeah, I'd love to hear the NFL draft was crazy where it's like Tim Tebow comes out and then Aaron Rodgers steals the day immediately with his comment, which he was definitely holding back for that to own that day, I think. But not only what was happening on Twitter, but we'd love to hear from you guys, like what you saw successful and kind of different things you guys were doing with the draft as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think going back to last year's NFL draft and working with Dave and his team during like really the hit of COVID and having to really put on some live event that is always in person and totally switching it to virtual.
And we missed the boats in Vegas. I was so excited for the boats.
I know. We were all ready to go next year.
It's either going to be a terrible idea or a great idea, but I was excited.
Exactly. We'll get on it next year. 2022 is the year for the boats in Vegas. But looking at last year and being able to kind of pivot to a totally virtual draft, hats off to the NFL for putting on such a spectacle and kind of using that firepower into this year, having it be a little bit of a hybrid. But from us, from the Twitter side, I think we really saw the magic of Twitter again, almost like an NBA trade deadline type of thing with the news that you mentioned. I mean, Tim Tebow comes out, 33-year-old, let's be a tight end. And then Aaron Rodgers like, nope, I'm going to steal the spotlight now. Tweeting about how he's unhappy. And I think that really sparked such a reaction from NFL Twitter. You see JJ Watt tweet, Patrick Mahomes tweets, this is going to be exciting draft weekend. And that's the beauty of Twitter. I think when you actually see athletes using it in the fun kind of bannery way and not just posting their own content or highlights or things like that, I think having a mix where you actually get to see the side of them with the helmet off almost, I think that's the most impactful thing we get to see with Twitter and athletes that utilize it. But then even just going into the actual draft and seeing Schefter on 2 phones, on TV, phone call, tweeting away and things like that, you really see the power again that Twitter has. And being able to see recent picks tweet about having their dreams come true and things of that nature, it doesn't get better than that. And seeing the reactions and the stories come out as well, it all unfolds on Twitter. And I think that's the beauty of it. And last year we did a pretty cool thread thread about tweet it into existence. This kind of started at the Super Bowl where Patrick Mahomes was tweeting about being the QB that says, I want to go to Disney World after winning the Super Bowl. He wins the Super Bowl. And then kind of taking that into draft and seeing all the draftees kind of tweets from 6, 7, 10 years ago about wanting to make it to the league and things like that. So we actually quote tweeted a lot of those and actually had copy that reaffirmed their dreams coming true and kind of threaded that throughout the top 32. So just fun things like that again, you get to be creative on and get to see a different side of things and make an impact during the draft.
Yeah. And then, I would love to hear from you, especially on the organic side. I mean, people are always trying to what I call growth hack, but always trying to find a way to play with the algorithm so it gets you to a really good place. Can you speak to what you're telling your partners, your athletes in terms of what works on Twitter, what seems to get the most engagement and things like that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, kind of speaking to it earlier, I think when we are talking about live events, tweeting in the moment is always going to be the best route to go. I think being able to join a conversation while it's live, and a lot of folks are on Twitter consuming, tweeting, conversating about a specific live event, always going to be the best route to take. But when we take a step back and actually look at why we want athletes to be on Twitter, why we want them to utilize it, it's really giving that behind the scenes kind of look. I think we see them with the helmets on TV. We see the stats from the leagues, from an ESPN, from whoever it is. Use your handle to really kind of give your fans that behind the scenes look and really your true authentic self. I think doing that in the right way really gives fans kind of the kind of helmet off type of look. And seeing Patrick Mahomes tweet about his wife joining the NWSL as an owner, the birth of his kid, things like that. I think that's always fun to see. And again, it gives them a more human feel. And I think you can really find that on Twitter. It's kind of unpolished, unlike an Instagram, things like that. Just kind of right off the cuff. And again, doing it in the right way.
I'm sure you do decks or you kind of do best practices or people that are doing it quote unquote right without playing too many favorites. Like, are there some athletes or teams or leagues that you would just like to shout out? Or just like, I think people listening to this show trying to get better at Twitter, trying to leverage it better, just some maybe things we could admire or look at to get better at.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I'm a Denver Broncos fan, so I feel a little weird saying Patrick Mahomes, but given that he's an MVP, Super Bowl champ, he just uses it freely. Like, it's him actually typing and tweeting. And I think sometimes we don't always see that with all athletes, but he just gives you the real, which I think is what's it all about. JJ Watt stands out as well. It's cool to see kind of his philanthropic side, the banter with his brothers on Twitter. And most recently when he announced he was going to the Cardinals and owning his own kind of event and announcement versus letting news outlets do it for him. I thought that was a pretty huge moment. I think we'll continue to see that from athletes as we move forward, them telling their own story, them breaking the news themselves versus the others. From a team side, a super recent example that just happened the other day, the Diamondbacks did a pretty cool thing. One of this guy's friends tweeted at the Diamondbacks.
I saw this. It was amazing. Yeah.
He's on a second day. He's like, hey, can I get a visual? My bro's on a second day, would love to check in. And it was this whole thread back and forth. And they actually ended up finding them.
They got Valley Sports Arizona, the TV channel involved.
Oh yeah. It was epic. So stuff like that is just fun. And it's only on Twitter, right? That stuff can only happen on Twitter. And I think again, that's kind of the beauty of it. But those are kind of some of my favorite ones. I would also shout out the NFL Live crew on Twitter. I love seeing their camaraderie back and forth between Laura, Mina, Dan, and Marcus Spears. They just do a really fun job. And it's cool to see kind of them utilizing all the different channels to communicate and stay in touch. So those would be kind of my top ones right now.
Love it. When you say do's and don'ts, like do what JJ Watt did, owning his message. Don't do what Paul Pierce did. That's a big no-no. Would love to hear about, original content and the strategies that, again, you either seen brands do or you guys have worked on together. Because I think talking about, there's so many brands, especially in the sports space, that Aaron Rodgers is not happy in Green Bay, and you see 100 different sports outlets saying that same graphic. But original content is really where you can separate yourself with things like spaces. But I guess the Diamondbacks example is kind of like that, but any other original content things that over the years that you've seen that just done a really good job of leveraging Twitter?
Yeah, I think it's definitely important to differentiate yourself. And I think what sometimes we don't see always done correctly is having different content per platform. I think being able to understand the impact that each platform has, I would put them all in a level playing field. I don't think one is better than the other, and everyone has their kind of secret sauce to play to. I think that is key. But from an original content standpoint, I've loved seeing kind of leagues introduce kind of parody accounts. So you look at the check down, right? Off of NFL. I think being able to give, again, kind of that casual side to the fan versus your kind of hardcore fan from the NFL allows you to attract different users and do different fun things that I haven't seen before. Like Andrew Hawkins on their side does hilarious parodies, and being able to see that kind of unfold on Twitter during when that conversation is happening live, it skyrockets. He gets millions of views due to the content and then the conversation that he's pairing it with. So I think, again, when brands can pair it with the conversation that's happening on the platform, it's going to be that much more impactful in the long run.
I do want to talk about revenue. You talked about the four things you oversee and help partners with. And I think as an industry, social media in general, I personally believe that there's billions of dollars being left on the table just for people not monetizing their social media properly. Really just the amount of eyeballs that you can have if you're a LeBron James or you are a sports team, being able to quote unquote sell commercials on on those viewers the same way people do with Nielsen ratings. Obviously it's engagement on the Twitter side, but would love to hear your thoughts on just where you see that going, because I think we're starting to see, athletes starting to take it more seriously, the Tom Brady's of the world, all those different things, Juju, obviously. But there's a huge opportunity, I think, for not only athletes off the field to make a lot of money with like branded partnerships and creating original content with brands as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's huge. And I think to your point, the athlete owning it is going to be where it's going. It's not Gatorade kind of owning it and running with it. It's the athlete building their own brand, building partnerships that they believe in and that are authentic to them, and utilizing that to kind of skyrocket off the platform. I think we've seen a lot of teams do really good job with it on Twitter, whether it's Amplify Pre-roll, things like that.
Yeah.
But again, to your point, I think having an athlete connect directly to an audience through a brand partnership is where it's going to really kind of take off. And you see it even with the draftees of this past week, Trevor Lawrence signing a crypto deal and things like that. Right. So being able to kind of get into that new age space and then utilize your social and the fan bases that you've built, it's only going to continue. And I think now that we're dealing with a younger generation of kind of the next superstar, they've already built their fan bases. They've started young, and it's only going to continue to grow. So that kind of instant impact of revenue is only going to kind of fall quicker. So
and I think I'm 34, and for me, like being on TV is still sexy. Like if I was on ESPN today, I would tell all my parents and stuff. But I think if you're 18, 19 coming up, like it's more about getting a retweet from LeBron or being on an Instagram story or ESPN posting something on their handle, opposed to being on linear TV where you may or may not even have cable at that point. So the generation's changing where it's a lot more cooler to be, again, engaged with on social than it is to be profiled on broadcast television.
No, absolutely. And I think not only that's changing, I mean, it's the way that the younger generation is consuming that content too. Yeah. I think to your point, of course, it'd be amazing to be on an ESPN or get a screenshot of being on, like scanning the audience at a game, but be able to have it on replay and being able to go look back to it, whether it is a TikTok video or an Instagram video or a video on Twitter. It's just different in the way that we consume it now. I think it's short form. I think it's kind of being able to tap in and out and get quick bits and snippets. So you're only going to kind of continue to see those changes make more of an impact on content moving forward.
Yeah, and TJ, when he was on the podcast, I think about a year and a half, he mentioned something which is like the retweet is the new, or the like is the new autograph. I mean, if your favorite athlete engages with your content or somehow, some way replies or what have you, I mean, that's what you're going across the schoolyard bragging about, not necessarily the actual autograph,
No, absolutely. And a follow is even better than that. I mean, sports aside, when Chrissy Teigen follows somebody on Twitter and you're like, whoa, that screenshot it, post about it. It's a whole thing for sure.
Does that mean Chrissy Teigen follows you? What were they?
Chrissy Teigen does not follow me, unfortunately, but I've seen a few others get followed, and it's a national holiday. So
exactly, that's awesome. What do you think of common mistakes? You talked a little bit about just being inauthentic and or hopping on trends that don't make sense for your brand, but any other just common mistakes or innocent mistakes you see brands making that they should just be wary of as they march forward in their strategy?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think timeline fatigue is something that we see sometimes, whether it's posting all video or all photos or really not mixing it up. I think being able to have kind of a holistic approach and exploring different products we offer, tools we offer to help kind of spice up your timeline, I think that keeps it fresh for users. I know it's hard sometimes in sports, the video is key, but being able to kind of utilize GIFs or do something fun with photos just helps keeps it different and keeps your users engaged. So I would say kind of timeline fatigue, especially just in the sports space, definitely helps kind of keep things fresh and light.
Yeah, and I think even with the clients we work with, and I often hear that people are trying to be everywhere at once. Like, let's have Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube. Let's go to Clubhouse now, where they haven't even really like dug deep at all in any one platform. So you're just kind of spread too thin across those platforms. So I guess if an athlete is looking to join, let's say they have a good Instagram following and they just haven't, for whatever reason, joined Twitter, but they want to join Twitter, but they also can't spend hours and hours on it every single week. What is kind of that first thing that you say, like, hey, if you're only going to tweet a couple times a week, or you're only going to like get your feet wet, here's what you should focus on. Maybe it is live tweeting during an event and just do one of those a week or a couple of those a month. But anything that you kind of like tell athletes to get started if time is limited?
Yeah, I mean, to take a step back, all the platforms you just named and having so many different strategies, social media managers do not get enough credit. So
Thank you.
Is a shout out to social media managers.
The social media manager of today is the CMO of tomorrow.
Literally, like the amount that they have to know, keep up to date on. Social's obviously always evolving. Like I can barely keep up with the changes we make on Twitter. I don't know how they do it across 10 other platforms. So major shout out to social media managers, community managers, because it is a job. But in talking with athletes and whether or not they're deciding to come onto Twitter, trying to figure out what social platform is best for them, I think that's key. What is best for you? Where do you feel most comfortable? You don't want to jump into something that is going to feel forced and then you're kind of dreading to commit to it. So to your point, I think it's being able to find what am I using Twitter for? And is it something that I'm going to continue doing? That's not to say we don't want athletes on the platform, but we want them to do it in that authentic, organic way.
Right.
So if they are trying to kind of dip their toes and get their toes wet with it, use the superpower of Twitter. That is the live events. It's breaking news. It's joining in on conversations, maybe tapping and replying to a teammate or a coach or whoever it is.
Yeah.
Use the power of the platform to your benefit. And I think that will kind of help ease you into utilizing it more as a power user.
And I think even if you're not a content creator, you make a great point. If you're an athlete, you don't have a ton of time, but you want to start building a presence just by you being a community manager, essentially, and like liking your teammates' posts, respond to some fans every once in a while, every time you're bored at the airport, what have you, that's going to start building a pretty big following on your own. I know in our line of work, a lot of times our most engaging tweets are the replies on another tweet. It's not the actual organic tweet on the feed. So that's the power of social and the power of Twitter. I think people forget about or don't put enough credence in. It's like by just like responding to people and making it a two-way conversation, that usually is your most engaging content.
No, absolutely. It's that 0-degree relationship that we always talk about. Am I going to meet Kevin Durant in person one day and have a conversation? Probably not, but I can see him reply to others and also kind of tap in. And he's one that replies to a lot of just
his actual handle or his burner accounts. Which one are we talking about here?
Either one. But to that point, he's someone who engages. And I think the point about the autograph and being engaged with and that factor, it's huge. And again, that can only happen on Twitter.
Well, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I've been asking people this, like, I want to get past it, but I think it's such a black swan event. It's something you and I will remember for the rest of our careers. When March and April happens in 2020, you and I both work in the sports world. Your partnerships in sports, you notice that Adam Silver, cancels the league, followed by the NHL, followed by the March Madness, everything else. And live sports literally goes away. Like, what is your initial reaction, both personally, professionally, like, because I mean, I know my head was spinning too. Like, what the hell does this all mean?
Yeah, those were some dark days. That week, I feel we just had the 1-year mark about a month ago. That week, like in the teens, like you said, where it was just one after another happening, and that domino effect from everyone kind of postponing and canceling. It was surreal. I have never dealt with something like that in my lifetime, and I hope, knock on wood, we never have to deal with it again. But professionally, first and foremost, just thinking of our partners. I mean, we work with people where their product is a live game, and to have those stripped away from them, we were just trying to support them in any way that we could and really put our thinking caps on how to engage a fan base when there's no games to talk about or plays to talk about. So being able to kind of work through that, but just be there for them first and foremost. Everyone's going through something that there's no playbook for. But as we slowly kind of saw things get planned to come back, whether it was the Last Dance or the WNBA draft or the NFL draft. That was when we really got to get creative and think outside the box. And
yeah, what was the first thing, I forget timeline wise, that actually was an event? Was it WNBA?
I think it was the WNBA draft.
Hmm.
It was the WNBA draft. They did it completely virtual. That was the first kind of real live event,
Yep.
and they did a fantastic job. Conversation on Twitter was huge, and we kept seeing that trend increase. You then get to the Last Dance, that blew the doors off of everything conversational wise, and it was really that first kind of TV event that we all got to sit and watch together, and we hadn't done that.
And not only TV event, but all like new content, like because everything at that point was recycled. Yeah.
For sure. And I mean, props to ESPN for getting that together and moving up that date. And they really delivered something that people needed during that time. So
I think too, the NBA, I just constantly like marvel at like what they were able to do with that bubble, which really gave, I think, not only sports a realistic chance at return, like the NFL, what have you, but also like the general public, like, wow, this can be done if you put in the right measures, if you test every day. There's like actually light in a tunnel if you do it this right way. Like that might go down in history books as you're talking about what the government was doing. I think the NBA probably did more than what the government was doing back then. So.
It is the best case study you will ever see. And props to Adam Silver and that whole team over there for getting it done. I can't imagine the amount of work.
And how many jobs they saved and how many,
100%. And I think we all needed NBA back, and just to see the format of it too, and all the playing games and kind of testing some new things while in there. It was cool to see, and it was just fun to see basketball back. I'm sure it was such a weird kind of trial and tribulation for players to go through, but the fun accounts and memes and even conversation we saw from the bubble, these four guys created a handle, NBA Bubble Life, and being able to see that kind of come to life on Twitter and telling the inside story, what was going on in the bubble, again, gives you a different kind of look at what was happening, and something that you could kind of only see happen and unfold on Twitter. So again, while it was some dark times in March and April, again, it gave us a different way to think and get creative and really just do some cool stuff with our partners to engage fans differently. And I think from the Showtime cam to courtside tweets in the bubble to tweets lasered on World Series baseballs and sent back to fans, we were just trying to think of any way we could that Twitter could have an impact on bringing fans back to the game, even though they physically couldn't be there.
Right. The $1 billion bubble, as we'll remember it, how much money that was able to make, which is awesome.
Yeah.
What are some follows that you recommend, like any marketer, anybody in social media, like on Twitter, follows that maybe you read daily or you get a lot of either inspiration from or just knowledge about the platform, marketing, sports, et cetera?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say a lot of the SPJ guys give some good intel. The Front Office Sports handle always with some good nuggets. Kind of has more of a cultural kind of, I don't want to say modern, but just kind of explore some different topics, really gets into some more cultural aspects of sports, which I always find interesting to read. I'm a big newsletter person. So whether it's Axios Sports, the Skim, the Daily, those kind of all help me kind of keep up on all the news. But I would say those are kind of the mix that I would recommend from a follow and newsletter standpoint.
Christine, a lot of people would love to be in your position. They maybe work in sports, they work in a team, they would love to work for a social network like yourself. So any advice for anyone striving to be in a position like you? Because I mean, the calls you're on and the stuff that you guys get to do is some pretty awesome, fun stuff.
Yeah, I definitely count my blessings every day. Super lucky, and even luckier to work on such a great team. I mean, you mentioned DH and TJ quite a few times, and it's nice to be on such a rock star team. But sports is a small industry. As big as it may seem, it's small. People know one another.
It's the same 33 people just keep on rotating jobs. That's what I would say.
Right? No, I mean, to your point, you look at Dave Feldman, who's at the NFL, and I was over at Dapper, and the industry just gets smaller and smaller, and who you work with. But to get a foot in the door, just shoot your shot. I mean, 9 times out of 10 you may miss, but the one time that it goes in, that's your connection in the door. And from there you can do some pretty great things. And I would say always give 110%, be curious, say yes to things, because you never know who you're working with or what you're working on, how that will then connect you to the next project. So those are the 2 pieces of advice I would give if you want to kind of try your hand at the sports industry.
Love it. One thing too, I forgot to ask you was, I think in a interesting way, COVID and everybody being able to log on to a Zoom like this virtually, it's really going to change the ability for athlete access forevermore. I mean, before you would have to get them to a satellite studio, go get them a car, work with their manager, get them a schedule. But now every athlete, every celebrity has taught themselves which is a big part, right? Like just the ability to be educated on how to log on to a video call, I think just changes the ability for every broadcast network, every social network, every, content creator to work with more athletes, work with more sports because, hey, James Harden, can you flip on a Zoom tonight from 6 to 7 p.m.? And he can be like, yeah, I'll hop on. And that just never was an option before. So although it hurt for a year to not be at sporting events, I think the access and the ability to just be more intimate with these athletes virtually is going to just skyrocket over the next 5 years.
No, I mean, COVID has definitely made some impacts for the good, to your point.
Mm-hmm.
I think so too. It's just going to be able to allow us to conversate in different ways now, I think, which I feel like we didn't do before. I think the access is key. I think that's what you're going to start to see moving forward, just the access. Again, it's that behind the scenes look, being able to kind of tap into athletes at different points. And
what JaVale did, and also Matisse Thybulle during the bubble. I mean, that's just like more and more athletes they're younger now. They'll do that stuff. And that's like, I feel like I was in the bubble watching that content.
Exactly. It's second nature to them now. And I think so too. I mean, you look at Twitter Spaces, right? You can tap into an audio space now if you're in the car on a waiting taxi off the runway, wherever you are. And it's those quick snippets again. So I think being able to kind of have these new products and ways of capturing content and communicating is just going to help us for the better in the long run.
Awesome. All right. Well, I know you know a lot of fun, amazing, talented people. So I always ask this question, ask TJ, ask all guests, if you could recommend anybody in your network that you think would be a great guest and provide a lot of knowledge for the audience. Anybody come to mind? Who would that person be?
It's a great question. I would say AJ Curry from the NFL. I think she has done a phenomenal job at the league, really expanding their social partnerships and just doing a lot of cool stuff on the platform. She was kind of the co-creator of the Twitter Super Bowl confetti, and she always has the ins with the athletes, and she's a TikTok influencer.
Good follow. Yeah.
So I would say AJ Curry for sure.
It's fine. You have to have DH on the show. And I was the first person I ever met was DH before TJ, before you.
I thought he'd be your original guest.
I know.
Kick this thing off and set the bar high. So AJ Curry or David Herman are two go-tos.
Yeah, you got to get DH at some point. I appreciate that. Well, and also a shout out to you and your team, from the agency side and partner side, I guess you can say. You guys are in a league of your own in terms of, I think, partner support, customer service. I have friends at all different networks and I love them to death, but your guys is like just the ability to respond quickly and get on things, even though you have a very small team. I don't know how you guys do it, but I know it means a lot to your partners, and you guys should be definitely proud of that, of being number one, in my opinion. So
no, we appreciate that. We always strive to kind of be that first line of defense for you guys, and we understand the frustration on the other end. So we're always here to help dwell that out and be here for whenever you need it. So we appreciate that sentiment.
Last thing for you, what are you most excited about as we get out of what was so constraining and handcuffed from COVID, and now we're getting back into normalcy here in the next sports season? What are you most excited about?
I'm just excited to go to a game.
Yes.
I think it was something that we all took for granted and thought we could go to any Sunday football game we wanted, any baseball game, and have a beer and a hot dog. And now I think I will never take it for granted again. So for me, it's getting back into the stands on the field and really, really enjoying a live action game in person.
And I always joke that I wasn't a huge concert guy, maybe one concert a year, but this next year I'll probably go to 7 of them just to scratch that itch, So I appreciate it. Well, Christine, thank you so much and for all your success over at Twitter and then breaking down some amazing knowledge for the guests. I appreciate it.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Christine.
Cool.
Thank you so much to Christine for joining us on the program. Some really good insight. Anytime we can talk to somebody at the actual social platform, we talked to Ash over at Reddit. We've talked to Dave over at Instagram, obviously TJ, now Christine at Twitter. But anytime we can kind of get the lowdown of what they're talking about internally, what they're pushing, what they're seeing and working on their platform, always good to get the inside scoop.
Amal at Snap as well.
That's right.
I think just TikTok and maybe Clubhouse now are the only ones we're missing.
Yeah, we need to, I guess, get on that. What have you been doing on? Will, I mean,
sorry.
It's time to,
sorry.
But no, I think I love what she said too about not only the Showtime cam and the confetti tweets and all that stuff, but on NFL Draft, It's so true, right? Like you think you're going to sit down to watch the NFL draft, and then Tebow news comes across your timeline. Oh, shoot, that's going to be the storyline. And then seconds later, Aaron Rodgers says he wants out. Just dominates day one of the NFL draft. I mean, that's how Twitter works, though.
I'm sure TJ and Jack and everyone over at Twitter was grateful that all that happened. But
Yeah.
I was going to ask you if I think it's so close now to having to need Twitter for events like that. If I told you the night of the draft you could only watch the linear broadcast or you could scroll through Twitter, I think I would take the app.
I take Twitter.
Yeah, you have to have it, right?
And I think that's what sports leagues are, not to get too deep into this, but they're struggling with, because even as a Laker fan, I think you can probably relate to this. I'm not watching every single game, but I'm getting highlights on Instagram. I'm watching the House of Highlights on YouTube, like 7-minute recap, which pretty much gives me everything I need to know and keeps me up to date. Oh, Dennis Schroeder's playing well, or oh, Kyle Kuzma got hurt this game, without necessarily having to invest 3 hours into the game. So that's what I think. Adam Silver always said, give people snacks and it will lead to them eating meals. But I do think it's maybe doing the opposite effect where, hey, I'd rather just get the highlights. I don't need to watch the game. So it'll be interesting to see how they navigate that in the future.
Like you said at the NBA draft too, Woj dominates that so much from an online perspective that you really don't need the linear broadcast.
And for me personally, like I know I'm probably rare in terms of large sports fans about the NFL draft, but after about pick 10, I'm out. I mean, at least the first round, but I'm not that invested in the college football, so to really know where all these guys go is not that exciting for me. I'll wait to see the next day.
It's more of the conversation, right? Because you could just read a list and see who got drafted. Like, okay, cool. Now I know where everybody's at.
But Justin Fields, the Chicago Bears. I mean, that excited
was my
me.
favorite move of the draft.
It's about damn time the Bears. I love it.
Overall, I think a great episode and really just hammering home how great Twitter is and all the things that you can do with it.
Twitter Sports, Christine, thank you so much for the time on the program. As always, we'd like to thank David Furker, of course, producer Will, for all their work on the program. We battled through a lot of adversity here on episode 65. I got to tell you, I mean, a lot of adversity. We found a way to pull it off. Still pulled off a 50-minute show there, even with some technical difficulties to start. So we'll push through.
Locked out of our own storage closet.
We'll become better because of it. All right. Thank you so much for listening. As always, we ask you, if you don't mind, if you like the show, if you like the free, the free content, check us out on iTunes. Give us a 5-star review. We're also on Spotify, all those different things. YouTube, if you want to see the video version, and all those things. All right. Powered by STN Digital. This has been another edition of Business of Social. I'm your host, David Brickley. We'll see you at 66.